Okay, guys, I think they're all set. We're going to bring up the final speaker. He's going to talk about what you really want to know on the current state of L2s on Ethereum. I hope I pronounced his name right. Put your hands together for Bartek Kiepuszewski.
Okay, so my name is Bartek, and I've been working in Ethereum ecosystem for the last 5 years. The last 2 years mainly on interoperability and scaling. Yeah. And 2 years ago, I founded L2s, which is like a community watchdog for all L2 things. And we'd like to think of ourselves as a group of people that make L2 operators accountable for what they do. But we also want to make sure that you guys, as L2 users, and I'm assuming that at least some of you are just L2 users, that you should not be scared of these constructions, and you should really understand the security trade-offs and the trust assumptions. So I don't know what is your personal experience, but I can definitely appreciate that sometimes when you talk to the professionals, the experts, they will try to tell you about, I don't know, the prime fields, Goldilocks, proof aggregation, proof composition, maybe power of tau, trusted setup, and whatnot. And eventually, you will get confused. Unless you're professional, unless you put 100% of your time and maybe even overtime into this field, eventually they will get you lost, right? And when they do, you feel kind of hopeless a little bit, and then you just stop caring, right? You just, okay, let me ape, my funds into whatever. And this is not good, right? This is not how we want you to think about these constructions. But the truth is that the way the Ethereum scales is technically very complicated. And there is just no other way around it, It's a very nasty business to scale blockchains so that they actually stay decentralized. And unfortunately, for a lot of users, they end up in some sort of a trusted setup, like, they choose, I don't know, things like Revolut or maybe, some other, different providers, and they just give up the whole idea of self-sovereignty, right? So what I want to do in this talk, essentially I want to give you a very simple mental model, which may not be 100% perfect, but I think it's good enough for you to actually get some sense out of all these constructions and to evaluate or to ask yourself, do you actually trust all these teams? And maybe the first question to ask yourself is like, why do you actually care? Why do you use DeFi in the first place? Because if you're only interested, in I don't know, speculating on some crypto assets or whatever, then maybe a centralized exchange is good enough for you. And maybe, it's important for you to give you access to some financial products that are normally restricted to accredited investors or whatnot, right? For me, for example, it's very important to make DeFi operators accountable so that I can actually see when I'm evaluating the smart contract code what exactly is happening behind the scenes. Because, I don't trust anyone, right? You've all seen what happened with centralized exchanges, how they used funds. And this is not what we are trying to build. But I think what is most important is that you start to think about self-custody, right? You have to kind of think about I'm really the owner of my funds. And why this is important? Well, think about the typical experience in a theme park, or maybe a theme park. Maybe it's not like the best example, maybe a better example is a casino, right? When you go into the casino, normally for some reason they don't allow you to use your cash. You have to buy chips, right, to play at the casino. I don't know why actually, but assume that there is a reason why they actually prefer you to use chips, right? So you go and exchange your real cash into chips, and then you spend a few hours in a casino, and hopefully you may end up with more chips that you entered, right? And then there's this moment of truth. Will they actually exchange your chips for the cash, because if they don't, then these chips are actually worthless, right? This is just plastic. And in fact, when you use L2s, in a way, the experience is somewhat similar. You have funds on L1, on Ethereum, and you want to move some of these funds to L2 so that you have access to cheap DeFi applications, because Ethereum is too expensive, right? So essentially, you're using these applications on L2 maybe for months, and then you want to get out. For whatever reason, maybe you stop liking this L2, maybe you use these funds for whatever else. What you really want to do is to make sure that you can always exit. And I think this is most important, because if you can't exit for whatever reason, then you're not in control of your money, right? So this is the experience of a friend of mine in a traditional finance. I mean, nothing to do with blockchain, maybe a little bit, right? Who has heard about N26? Yeah, some of you, right? This is a well-known German bank that, like fully internet, fully online, and apparently it's crypto-friendly as well. They advertise that you can buy 200 coins, whatever. But the fact is that, I mean, this is the true story, right? It's not made up. So a friend of mine had an account with them, and then a few months later, and truth is, he used this account for also withdrawals from the crypto exchange, and then he got this letter, like literally for no reason, right? They frozen essentially his account, and the worst part is that there was no way to find out why, right? It's literally a letter, hey, your account is frozen, and we can do it. Just check, the fine print in terms of conditions, right? Like, who's reading these? Like, literally no one that I know, right? It's a way too long document. They can freeze your funds, and then I mean, there's this dread, will you have access to these funds? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Why? They refuse you to tell you why. And this is the worst part of the story for me, it's that the process is completely opaque. It's not transparent. And if you lived through this experience, you really want to make sure that if you have funds like crypto assets, this is not what you want to see in your email, right? And obviously, if you put your funds into a centralized exchange, I mean, this is exactly the experience you may have. If you put your funds into a roll-up or into L2, you want your experience to be different. And when you think about it, does it actually mean, for the experience to be different? I think there are two main concepts that you need to understand, and that is of a safety and liveness. Safety understood as the operator of the rollup cannot steal your money, right? Like, remember, your real money is still in L1. It's just sitting there in L1, waiting for you to get out. Now, if that money can be stolen by the operator, then obviously this is not good, right? And we say that the system is safe when the operator, the malicious operator, cannot steal your money that's yours in the escrow. Now, the second property is a little bit less understood, in my opinion, and that is of aliveness. And that is essentially a way for operator to freeze your money by not processing your withdrawal request, right? So that would be the equivalent of you, say, having money in Binance or whatever, and you're trying to withdraw, and suddenly you've got this message that withdrawals are halted, and you cannot withdraw your money, right? So they're not stealing, because presumably they can't do that. They're just censoring your withdrawal request. So you want to use constructions that cannot censor you. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, what it means in practice. But I think that your mental model should be very simple. They can't steal your money, and they can't really freeze your money by censoring or just ignoring your withdrawal requests, right? I mean, it's not a very difficult mental model, I think. And that's it to this. There's not much more, frankly. Turns out it's very complicated, right? Both properties are actually technically very complicated to achieve, and how they're achieved, I'm gonna spend a few more minutes to tell you about it. But you can be assured that what we do at L2Beat, we're jumping into every single rabbit hole that you don't have to do it, right? We check for safety, we check for liveness, we even develop UIs that allow people who cannot withdraw, they allow them to interact with L1 smart contracts, so they actually can withdraw if the withdrawal request is being censored, right? So, we are essentially helping the community to actually use all these constructions in the way we believe that they are intended to be, right? And in our opinion, they intended to be trustless. You don't need to trust these guys. And this is one of the common myths that a lot of people think that if these operators are running, let's say, centralized sequencer, that clearly that's a problem, right? Because clearly centralized sequencer can do anything. But the truth is that they can't, right? Even though if they're centralized, they cannot steal your money and they cannot block your withdrawal request. So why does it matter that the sequencer is centralized, right? And let's have a look first at the safety. So the safety essentially means that, like I said before, the rollup operators cannot steal your assets, and there are two different approaches. You probably know that, right? There's a pessimistic approach, which ZK rollups use, and essentially what you want Ethereum, which is decentralized, which is permissionless, and blah, blah, right? It provides you with a great economic security. You want Ethereum to validate every single L2 state root. And why do you want to do that? Because operators can steal your assets only if they publish an invalid state root, right? They tell Ethereum that it's not you, but someone else that owns the money. And this is how they steal, right? They essentially say, you're not the owner of your funds. It's me who's the owner of the funds. That's a theft. So you want Ethereum essentially to validate all these claims. And this approach, when you think about it, because you have to validate every single L2 state root, like let's say every, 5 minutes, maybe every 10 minutes, right? That sounds kind of expensive because you have to pay Ethereum in gas to do that. But in fact, it scales great because the validation is actually much, much cheaper than the execution of the L2 block. I mean, this is the alternative, right? To re-execute the L2 block and to find out if that L2 state root is actually valid. The major problem with this approach is that if there's a problem or a bug in a proving system, then essentially, that's a huge issue, right? And then the alternative is the optimistic approach. You want Ethereum to validate L2 state root only if there's a dispute, and hopefully that never happens, right? Like Arbitrum and Optimism, two most well-known optimistic rollups in the production, I mean, they've never had a dispute. And they've been running for like 2 years or whatever, right? So like, you may wonder, like, what the heck is Ethereum even doing there? It's not checking anything, but the truth is that this is the promise of the optimistic approach. So it seems cheap, but the question is there anyone watching really, right? Is the system truly trustless? What would happen if there was a dispute? Do you really trust that something would happen and Ethereum actually would adjudicate the dispute? So this is the page taken from L2Beat. From the risk analysis, you can see all the rollups over here, and the column called state validation essentially talks about the safety. It talks about how we make sure that the L2 state roots are being validated, what kind of approach is used, and we intend to essentially give even more details. But what you really want to see in this column is some explanation how Ethereum makes sure that the operators cannot steal your money, how the L2 roots are actually validated by Ethereum. Now, as I said, there are two different approaches. There's optimistic, there's a ZK. So the work on the optimistic approach, that's been going on for more than 2 years. The history is that Optimism launched in 2021, the first fraud-proof system, and then they scraped it because it wasn't very efficient, and they focused on building the community. Also, they worked with George Hotz on what's called Canon. It's a very interesting interactive fraud-proof system that uses MIPS emulator to run the fraud proofs. And my understanding is that Optimism right now is working on a major refactor, and they will have multiple proof systems running at the same time, so they can actually even challenge each other. But the truth is that as at that moment, Optimism does not have a fraud-proof system running. So you have to trust the operator, that they don't lie. The Arbitrum, on the other hand, they launched a little bit later, but not much, and they do have a fully running interactive fraud-proof system. They changed it, and right now it allows whitelisted validators to actually challenge the operator if they find that the operator is lying. And you, as a users, you have to trust these whitelisted validators, right? So you may think, well, this is not good, right? I still have to trust these validators. Again, my understanding is that they're working on opening it up with a new version of the proof system, and they want to make sure that malicious validators don't DDoS, the fraud-proof system. So that's the official reason why this is behind the whitelist. ZK rollups, the major milestones for me for generalized rollups. Starknet launched their first generalized ZK rollup back in last year. And this year we had the major launches from both ZK Sync and Polygon ZK EVM. I mean, it's a mind-boggling technology, frankly. I spent a lot of time, looking at the details of that, but you can be assured that, these are very new constructions, and they allow the operators to prove cryptographically that they're not lying and they're not stealing your coins, right? And then we've got Scroll, Linea, they will be launching also this year with the intent of directly proving EVM computation. So, we're very much looking forward to this. And when you think about those, invalid state roots, you also have to think about the problem of upgrades. Like, what if the operator can actually upgrade the system and remove the proof system entirely and replace that with, the manual process? So you also have to worry about that. And all this information you can get from the risk analysis from L2bit. And as an example, if you have a very small multisig which serves as a kind of a security council that can override these state proofs, then essentially your proof system is not doing anything, because the majority of the security council can override the proof system, but they can also block the necessary override if there's a bug in a proof system. So that's for the safety, right? So safety, don't steal my assets. The liveness, don't freeze my assets. So this is actually also super important, because if they freeze your withdrawal request, then your money is as good as gone, I believe. And this is even more nuanced because L1, I'm sorry, the state root, this is the only piece of information that L1 has. So to withdraw without the help of the operator, you have to actually prove that you own your money. L1 does not know that you own your money, and L1 only knows what is the state root of the L2 state. So you have to actually provide L1 with the proof, with the Merkle proof, with the whole path through the whole state tree. But how do you get the state tree in the first place, right? If the operator is malicious. And this is why we need this scary thing called data availability. We need operators to actually publish information somewhere so that you as a user can reconstruct the whole state. It's super important if you want to withdraw when the operator is censoring. This data availability is crucial, and you have to remember that operators can both censor your individual withdrawals, but they can also disappear entirely, right? They can stop working. And again, on L2bit page, you can go to risk analysis, and you can see that in case of the sequencer failure, there are certain delay that has to be observed, and then after that you can try to force your withdrawal request through L1. And when the proposer experiences failure, proposer being the entity that actually submits the L2 state roots, Again, you may have an ability, like with Arbitrum, to actually try to push the state root yourself, kind of like a claim that this is what you own. Or in case of such instance, you just can't do it at the moment, right? And we're like pushing all these systems to actually allow you to do that. So for both safety and liveness, we need this thing called data availability. We need the operators to actually publish the data, and they can choose. Optimistic rollups have to publish L2 blocks, and ZK rollups, they have a choice. They can publish either L2 blocks or they can publish state diffs. In both cases, you need this information to reconstruct the L2 state in case of emergency, essentially, right? And again, to achieve true self-custody, you need both safety and liveness. This is as simple as that. And that's why we want this data to be published somewhere where you don't need, again, to trust some external operator, right? This is your weak point, the data availability. Because what happens when this data is published to an external server or whatever, and they don't reveal you all the data? Again, you've got a problem, right? Again, you might not be able to withdraw. So you want to really, really make sure that the data is published somewhere that is always available to you to reconstruct this state for the withdrawal. And as I said before, you've got two options. You can publish full L2 blocks. You can publish state diffs. So I'm not going to go into the detail. This is probably the topic of another talk, and I'm running out of time. But again, going to L2Beat, you can check the data availability, and you can see whether the data is published on chain, like on Ethereum, and then Ethereum guarantees the data will be available, or the data is actually kept somewhere else. And why would you keep data somewhere else? Because it's actually quite expensive to publish the data on Ethereum. So some constructions, they publish the data somewhere else, but then you run into this issue that you have to trust that someone else for your withdrawals, right? Let's take an example of the recently launched or announced Polygon POS. The team announced that they want to actually prove the execution of the proof of stake chain for Polygon. That's great. That means that the validators can no longer steal your money, but because the data is still kept inside, Polygon POS validator network, they can actually freeze your money. So in a way, you still need to trust them. This is a great improvement, no doubt, but the trust assumptions actually are the same, right? You still, for the withdrawals, you still need to trust Polygon validators, and your ideal scenario is that you don't need to trust anyone else, right? There are no additional trust assumptions. So this is why you want to pay Ethereum for data availability. You get very strong economic guarantees of safety. You've got the very strong censorship resistance. If the operator censors you, you just push your transaction through L1, and hopefully you will, the Ethereum validators will make sure that your transaction will not get censored, right? So you can always get your money out. So this is what we do at L2Beat. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources, and like I said before, we like to think of ourselves as a community-run resource. We love all the operators, and they both love us and hate us at the same time, so it's like an ambivalent relationship, kind of. In fact, they love us to fund the competition in a way, right? But the truth is that, with all of them, no exception, they actually appreciate what we do, but we do it all for you, right? We do it all for users, and we think of ourselves as a public good company in a way, right? So we provide a service that actually make the operators accountable without help of some external regulators. We think that this community should self-regulate, and we think that this is how it should be done. By essentially not trusting anyone, but having someone that verifies some other people's work, right? So we kind of audit these systems, but we're not a typical audit company, right? We don't look for bugs. We read the code of every single system to the very last line, and we report the trust assumptions on our website. So I encourage all of you, to check it out, and I encourage all of you to help us with this journey. I'm going to skip the last 2 slides because I'm over time, but we need you as well. We are hiring. If you're interested in any capacity, check it out. I hope that this work is extremely valuable and exciting for potentially some of you. And I'm going to leave you with this comic because I like to end with something that will stick with your mind, and I wouldn't be able to say it better. Don't trust anyone. Don't trust marketing teams. Don't trust white papers. Don't trust documentation. And I guess read the code. And if you're not feel like you have time to read the code, let us read the code, right? Let us read the code and let us report everything that we do and everything that we claim on our website. We always provide references to the code. We always give you a quote. You can check it out yourself. Why we're saying what we're saying, and we love your support. I mean, we are happy to receive a lot of support from the whole Ethereum community and from you guys as well. So thank you so much. And yeah, any questions? Yeah, I've got a few on my screen over here, but maybe let's start with a question with audience. Do we have a mic?
One, two.
Yeah, so one question from audience and 2 questions from here, and we're running out of time. I think everyone is hungry, right?
You mentioned that you are reading the code of all the L2s that are published on L2B. Did you ever have a case when you actually found a discrepancy between what the team claims and what is actually implemented in the code?
All the time. I hope that answers your question. I'm not going to go into the details, of the specific cases. I believe that, in most cases, it's just the problem with outdated documentation and, maybe over-ambitious plans, if you like, right? But all the time.
Thank you.
Okay, so in my opinion, which of the rollups is the most secure? I think that rollups right now are still, they have a lot of training wheels. We are still building them, so we didn't get to the stage where we can actually claim that one or the other is the most secure. I was actually thinking about publishing what I call ossification index, right? That would be really like a rating index that would say when was the last upgrade. I'm kind of assuming that with every upgrade, they can introduce bugs, right? They can introduce something wrong. So I'm kind of hoping that if something was running for let's say 2 years without any change, and if there's $1 billion, which is essentially a bounty, right, in this system, that construction sounds to me more secure than the construction that was upgraded a week ago and claimed to use the most modern fancy cryptography, right? It's a bold claim, but the system is not tested in the production. And we've all seen bugs. You will be hearing about bugs in rollups. And believe me that Ethereum researchers are very, very concerned that those new constructions, especially using ZK, the most modern ZK technology, they will have bugs. That's the problem, right? That's why we're talking about security councils, maybe 2 different proving systems running at the same time. And if there is discrepancy, if one proving system says A, the other one says B, then maybe there's a security council that will adjudicate, who's right and who's wrong, right? Another question, so many things to build, what's next for L2B? Yeah, I mean, this is actually crazy. So we always seem to be running out of resources and people to build. There's so much to build, but you will see very soon on L2B, you will see a very detailed breakdown of TVL. We know that there are some native coins being minted right now on L2s. USDC can be minted natively on Arbitrum. We will do a very detailed breakdown very soon of of how much of the TVL comes from the bridge and how much of the TVL comes from what we call a native minting. And then we will also look or concentrate on explaining liveness a little bit better. You will see very, very soon how often these rollup operators are submitting state roots to Ethereum, and what is like the average time to what we call a finality, right? When you can be sure that your L2 transaction is finalized on L1. And I think it's a very important metric for a lot of users and for a lot of applications, but you will see that some rollups, they submit L2 blocks virtually every block, like Optimism, very, very often, and some every maybe 6 hours, for example, right? So Ethereum essentially doesn't know what happened in the last 6 hours, like none. So if that information is gone, then you won't be able to actually, like use this information on Ethereum. Which rollup should we use for our dApp in a current state? This is probably one of the hardest questions, in my opinion. I think the rollups should try to differentiate with some special features that will convince you specifically that this is a good environment for you, right? Because otherwise they will all look very much the same for you. And I think this is, for example, it's my personal opinion that different applications will be built on rollups submitting state diffs, and different applications will be built on rollups submitting L2 blocks, because there's a different trade-off in terms of security, finality, and cost. And some additional functions like I've heard the WorldCoin, for example. I mean, this is maybe a controversial example, but maybe for some users actually it's important that you want to make sure that your users are humans, right? So if that's the case, and if you're building an app that somehow leverages this functionality, you may look at the WorldCoin, which will be a rollup very, very soon. If, on the other hand, you want to make sure that you tap into, I don't know, the huge community of Coinbase users, you may want to check Base, which will again launch very soon. So I'd look for the community and obviously for the technical features, and we will make sure that all these constructions eventually they will be secure, right? But you need to understand the trade-offs, the current trade-offs. All right, thanks so much again.